Welcome to the Strategic Veteran, where we chart the course from service to civilian triumph. I'm Adam Peters, a veteran, entrepreneur, and your fellow navigator in the quest for a life of impact and fulfillment. My mission is simple: to empower you with the tools and stories that turn challenge into opportunity. Having walked the path from active duty to where I stand now, I understand the search for purpose that comes with hanging up the uniform. It's a path I've walked, with its trials, its tribulations, and its victories, and it's a journey we're on together. This podcast is more than just conversation. It's a beacon for those seeking to redefine our missions through entrepreneurship. It's about igniting the entrepreneurial spirit that lives within us, the spirit that compels us to create, lead, and make our mark on the world. Here we connect with veterans who have built businesses, sparked change, and found their purpose in the marketplace of ideas. They're not just surviving, they're thriving. They've transformed their service into startups, their experiences into enterprises, and they're proof that you can too. So whether you're scribbling business plans on napkins or stepping into the arena of innovation, remember, you're not alone. You're in good company. So let's explore these stories of transformation and take the first steps together on our path to purpose. Let's begin. What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the Strategic Veteran. I'm your host, Adam Peters, and today we have the honor of speaking with Rochelle Smith, a former Air Force First Lieutenant whose journey from service to advocacy is nothing short of inspiring. Rochelle grew up in the Air Force family, which instilled in her a sense of duty and resilience from a young age. She followed in her mother's footsteps by joining the Air Force, where she served as a public affairs officer. However, her military career was marred by significant challenges, including domestic violence and military sexual trauma, leading to severe PTSD and depression. Despite these hardships, Rochelle turned her pain into power by founding the Silenced Voices of MST, a podcast dedicated to supporting survivors of military sexual trauma. Her show is a beacon of hope, offering a platform for survivors to share their stories, gain strength, and become heroes of their own narratives. Today, Rochelle will share her journey, the pivotal moments that shaped her path, and her mission to change military culture and help others find light in the darkest of times. So let's dive in and warmly welcome Rochelle Smith, the true embodiment of what it means to be a strategic veteran. Rochelle, super grateful to have you here. Welcome to the show. I can't wait to help you tell your story.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, of course. Let's dive right in. Obviously, we covered what inspired you to join the Air Force, but how was it growing up for you? What was it like growing up for you? Where'd you grow up? And really, what was the inspirational thing about joining the Air Force?
Well, so my parents are immigrants. My dad's from Jamaica and mom's from Grenada. And my mom came from next to nothing. And her uncle actually served in Vietnam, and he was from Grenada as well. But going to Vietnam made him able to set up life for his family, and she kind of saw that and said, oh, okay. And she happened to meet my dad in high school, and their love story is adorable. But my mom is the embodiment of taking nothing and turning it into something. And I don't know, I've always been very inspired by that. And she's just an incredible woman. She's a nurse, and so she's deployed numerous times, and I knew I couldn't nurse, but I did want to serve because of her. And my younger brother actually ended up serving too. And growing up, let's say we lived in Mississippi, Alaska, Texas, Germany, back to Texas. And then my first duty station was up in Washington State. We've been all over.
True military brat, just kind of all over. What do you claim as home?
The place we were the longest was Germany and Mississippi, so 5 years apiece. But I'm not exactly a German girl, so.
Do you speak it?
I was pretty good at it while we lived there, but it's been like 15 years now, so.
Very much a use it or lose it skill.
Right,
yeah.
right.
Yeah, I took German in high school and college, and I always read it and wrote it better than I spoke it.
Right, yeah.
It's so much easier to read it and write it than it is to speak it, because it's so fast and big words.
Yeah. And I don't know, though. It seems like the German language, they have a word or expression for just about anything. It could be like, my aunt died last week, and they have a word for that.
They really do. Yeah. So joining the Air Force was kind of a no-brainer for you because your mom was your hero, right? And so why public affairs? Like, what did you? I'm sure you had your pick of the litter, right? Like, you could done whatever job you wanted.
I actually got really lucky. I was in ROTC in college and I majored in communications, but like I would say because of being an Air Force brat, I really valued how people communicate and like, how that's evolved since the 80s. I mean, what was it, 96 maybe, we got our first AOL CD and like I was hooked. Like I loved the internet and I thought that the internet was going to be uh, I thought it would result in world peace, basically, because there's people all over the world sharing their ideas, their cultures, their thoughts. And I mean, it didn't quite end up that way, but everybody has like their little niche of people that they relate to, that they can, share those same thoughts and ideas. And I think that's beautiful that people in like India can be chatting with people in Canada and they're like not related. They just really love The Office or something like that. So I got really lucky to get public affairs, and it gave me the opportunity to be the face of the Air Force and really see every job in the Air Force.
So, what is the role of a public affairs officer? Because it's kind of broad, right?
Yeah. The joke in PA is that you do practically anything, and you are the face of whichever branch you're in, but the messaging, like you would write speeches or talking points for your commanders. You run the social media, you write the news stories, you do community relations. Hey, sometimes there's an air show. Like it's so much. You do base tours, and my favorite thing was actually the tours. There was one day, I forget which school in Oklahoma. For some reason, they were in Washington State, and they were like the bear claws or I don't know, but like somehow their entire like cheer team was there. But then one of the pilots at my first base said like, hey, my sister is really interested in public affairs and she's visiting right now, and she happened to go to that same school and she was so excited, and that was like my favorite day.
That's awesome. What what unit in Washington were you in?
What was it, the 92nd Air Refueling Wing?
Was that before they became a joint base or after they were a
Oh,
joint
that
base?
one's over at Joint Base Lewis McChord. I was in Spokane on the other side at Fairchild.
Fair enough. Because I got out at JBLM, which
Gotcha.
I mean, that side of the mountains is gorgeous in the
Yeah.
summer. It really sucks the rest of the year. It really sucks the rest of the year. So this is the part of the story that you're really here for to tell, and kind of what has inspired everything that you're doing outside of the Air Force, which is an ultra important role. But you face significant trauma events really even before you were a full active duty Air Force officer. So I'm going to give you the floor and let you tell your story about that, because this is something that, as we discussed in the meeting, bringing you on the podcast, like there's not enough attention called to this. And I think partly because there are a lot of units where, for example, like me coming from the infantry, this isn't prevalent. You don't see this. So it's just kind of not really, demonstrated or talked about. So the floor is yours to tell, your side of the story and what's actually happening to women in the military, and I'm sure men as well. And we'll get to that, but particularly women. We've had 2 other women on the show who have very similar stories and went through the same thing. So please, the floor is all yours.
Yeah, I would say, what was it, maybe 2010. I had the summer of 2010, I'd just gotten done with field training, which is the ROTC version of basic training. It was 28 days long, and I came back, feeling like a badass, and you just did this amazing thing, and you got re-blued, and I don't know, the guy I started dating then, I think me just being young and dumb and enamored with somebody that was like super hot, like I didn't really see the red flags. And I think we were together about a year. And that one wasn't a great relationship, but there wasn't really abuse involved. But like I was very heartbroken when he got stationed in Korea. And I think maybe a few weeks after that, it might have been a month, I started a new job, and there was this guy in my training class, and he just seemed like very charismatic. And I don't know, I felt like drawn in basically, and turns out he was a psychopath. Like, not me being an armchair psychiatrist, but me uh, telling therapists parts of, or not even parts, but just what the relationship was like. And they're like, oh, no, 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 that was a sociopath. And I was like, oh, okay. But
So actually getting professionals to tell you what was going on as
what,
part of
yeah,
your healing journey, you can speak to how these people actually are.
right.
Totally understand.
And I know on like TV shows, they talk about people with like dead eyes, and that's a thing. And I didn't know. Even though I was an Air Force kid and grew up all over the world, my parents were very protective. So I was really, really sheltered. And I didn't know that there were people out there that genuinely don't give a damn about anyone else but themselves. Like they don't care who they hurt or harm as long as they get what they want. And this was one of those people. And we were Netflix and chill buddies for like 6 months. And then another guy started working at that place that we worked at, and he showed me like, I guess, genuine interest in being in a relationship. So the sociopath was like, well, I can't have that. So we started a relationship, I think around January of 2012. And then like the next 6 months were, I don't have words for how bad it was, where there was the hitting, the arguing, the gaslighting, the work schedule I had at that time. It was my senior year of college, and I worked full time, and I was in ROTC, and I had school full time. So basically, my day would start at about 5 o'clock in the morning and end at midnight. And I may or may not have had time to, do homework and sleep and stuff. So mostly I would sacrifice the sleep. And then he would also keep me from sleeping just with arguing and stuff. Like he would be like, oh, I heard you were at a party. And I'm like, how could I go to a party if I don't even sleep?
I was
But
gonna say,
like,
yeah, motherfucker, I'm working from 5 to midnight every day. Like,
right. And like he was a part-time person. So like, like basically, he was projecting and accusing me of doing all the stuff he was doing, but it resulted in, choking and hitting and like all of this just stuff. And I was so broken down by the work schedule that I didn't even stop to think of, hey, this isn't normal, And I don't know, like when I started school, I was pretty much straight A's, maybe a B in like math or something like that. But I went from, having pretty much perfect grades to get on scholarship to my senior year. Oh my, I barely passed. Like I barely graduated because of this person. And um,
and that has larger implications on your career also, right? Because so much of ROTC programs or even the military academies are based on grades, performance, PT scores, right? So this is definitely affecting your future as well.
Yeah. And I would say maybe around February, like I couldn't stay awake in class, and I was downing like Monsters and Red Bull and just pretty much anything that had caffeine in it. And I was still like, anytime I sat down, it was just like, like I just couldn't stay awake. And looking back as someone who now understands the signs of domestic violence, it was obvious what I was going through, but no one no one asked, like, hey, are you okay? They would be like, you need to stop falling asleep in class, or you're asleep in uniform. Like no one stopped to say, hey, you were high functioning, like rock star. Now you can't even keep your head up. Like, what's going on? No one said that. And there was, I want to say it was April of that year, there was like a like genuine rape, and it like escalated from there to worse, where I think I had like drunkenly talked to the ex before that, talking about this sociopath, saying like, yeah, I mean, I don't know, I'm not really into him, but like, it's a means to an end until I get where I'm going or whatever. Sometimes you're in relationships like that. And um, I didn't know it wasn't normal for a boyfriend to like always have your phone and always go through your Facebook messages and all of that stuff. And it's not, ladies, if that's happening to you, run. Like, get the hell out of there. It's not normal for someone to say, I need your phone. I need to go through your messages or break into your phone. But he saw that conversation, which happened like months before we were even together. And um, I just remember him bursting through my bedroom door and like screaming at me. And yeah, next thing I know, I am just in the worst pain I think hopefully I will ever be in my life. And he knew exactly what he was doing. And I just remember holding my breath, like, okay, maybe if I just suffocate myself, I'll die. And like,
It'll end.
that. And it ended, and he made me get in the shower, and like, I will never forget seeing blood in my shower like that. And I was sobbing, and he just gave me this hug and like left. And I just remember getting back in my bed and going to work after that, and just trying to pretend that that morning had not happened. Like, I don't even think I went to school that day, but I went to work. And then it just got worse and worse and worse and worse after that. And nobody, like, I was terrified of my own shadow by that point. Like, if someone was like, hey, Rochelle, I'd be like, what? Like, it was just, everything was terrifying to me. And like, that same sort of stuff just kind of kept happening and happening. And then I graduated from school by like the skin of my teeth and commissioned, and he was like at my commissioning ceremony. So like, I don't even like looking at pictures from that day, because when I see the smile on my face, it's very like,
It's forced, it's
right,
fake, it's not real,
right,
because you're not who you're supposed to be in that moment, right? Like,
right.
that moment probably looked a whole lot different than in
Yeah.
your mind, right? Than what it actually ended up being.
Yeah, it was looking back, I don't know how I got through that. It was just like being on autopilot kind of. And um I remember moving back to my parents' house because I was like, well, I don't want to pay rent while I'm waiting to go active duty. And then he happened to get fired from the job at that time. And I was like, this is it. Like, I can escape. And I did. I broke up with him. And then there was this onslaught of terror after that, where stalking, my phone, I think one time he called me like 200 times in a span of like 3 hours. um, then there was a night where I left work, and I had told like the security people there, like, hey, who is really like making me feel scared. Like, I didn't say what had happened over the previous 6 months, but like, from the stuff he was putting on Facebook, and it was like clearly he was like unhinged. But they were, walking me to my car, and one night he was parked at the parking lot at the building next to art building. And my friends, John and Christine, they were this wonderful couple at the job. They walked with me to my car and then left at the same time I did. And they saw his headlights turn on. And
this guy took it to the next fucking level.
oh, yeah.
Like, Jesus.
Yeah. And as I picked up my phone to call John, he was calling me saying, "Hey, I don't know if you saw, but you know who?" And I'm like, "Yes, I'm terrified. Like, what do I do?" So like, I just get on the highway and drive, like I try to go home, and he legit like tries to run me off the road that night. And John and Christine got in between our cars with their car, like insurance be damned, I guess. But like, yeah, they were able to head him off enough that I was able to get home. And all of this, like at some point I should have called the police. And
Yeah, I was wondering about
yeah,
that. Like,
I never even thought like, hey, this is bad enough for the police to be involved, because at that point I was so shut down mentally that, like I just wasn't even making logical decisions anymore. It was just eat, sleep, drink water,
yeah, just surviving,
Yes.
basically, right? Like, and
Yeah.
it's not clicking in your head. Like, okay, it's not normal to have to be escorted to my car. It's not normal
Right.
for headlights to come on behind me and somebody try to run me off the fucking road because they
Yeah.
can't handle that I broke up with them, or they don't have control anymore. Really, is what it is.
That's exactly
And so I totally understand where, and it's like, people on the outside who aren't experiencing it, they'll look at it and be like, "Girl, why didn't you call the damn cops? Like, what the fuck are you thinking?" Right? But
yeah.
here you are telling your story very candidly, and I'm super grateful for that. And you're telling people like it's not as simple as you think it is from the outside.
And yeah, when you get to that survival mode, I think it's like parts of your brain, like it's not that they don't work, it's just like they're not prioritized at that point. So
Right.
it's just survival, like eat, sleep, drink, and that's it. But I remember that happening, and then even then I don't think I called the police or said anything to my parents. But then during the relationship, he like forced me to take nudes, and I was like, no, like I'm not doing that. I'm about to be, an officer in the
Right.
Air Force. That's the last thing I need. And it was either, take these pictures or I'm gonna fuck you up. So
It's like not a real easy. I mean, like, what do
right.
you do, right?
And so, I mean, I took them, and at least had the foresight not to put my face in them. But um, all of a sudden, those pictures started, showing up in my email inbox and were texted to me from blocked numbers. And I think even that night when he ran me off the road, he masked his phone number with our jobs number, because I had emailed my direct supervisor saying, hey, like he just tried to kill me. And so they were like, okay, just take the week off. Like, I think that was the first and only time I felt truly supported at that job, because that was a whole thing. But I think that supervisor, she had a similar experience, so she knew the gravity of someone escalating it to that point. And yeah, from then it was these pictures all the time. I'm going to send them to your commander. I'm going to send them to your parents. I'm going to put them all over the internet. Like, da 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 da. I had mentioned 4chan to him once, because like the ex prior to that, he like lived on there, which red flag in retrospect. But like,
I don't even know what 4chan is, to be honest.
that is pretty much the birthplace of memes.
Okay.
And also, everybody's anonymous there. And
It's just a bad place. Just stay away from it, right?
it's like Reddit, but whatever's past steroids.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
But yeah, everything's anonymous, and there's a particular category that's called B, and that means random, and that's where people will post anything, and that could be, revenge porn or pictures of cucumbers. Like, I don't know. It's just like
Yeah, it just runs the gamut, right?
right. And this was 2012, so revenge porn wasn't really widely known about. And that was when I went to the police, was when these pictures started getting out of hand. And I actually had messaged my ex from that time's best friend, who I was still somewhat close with, and he was actually the person that coined me at my commissioning ceremony. Or no, he was my first salute. That's it. But I said, hey, like, this guy is going nuts. I'm terrified. I don't know what to do. Can you talk to X, because he was super adept at computers and stuff. And he said, go to the police. My wife will go with you. Like, and so I did. And he also called the ex. But like, I go to San Antonio City Police. I am sobbing in this, it was not even like they took me to a place. I was just where somebody came out to say, hey, what's going on? And
yeah, at the front desk, huh?
Yeah. And I am sobbing, sweating, shaking, like full on panic attack, explaining the last 6 months. And when I described that first rape in April, the fucking cop says, well, you should have come in and reported it then. And this was a woman. And,
really? That surprises me that a woman would say that to another woman.
I don't know. I had all of these text messages saying, like, I'm going to fucking kill you. You're going to die. You're a bitch. Like, all these just, like, pretty incriminating stuff, in my opinion. Like,
yeah.
But at least for threats and harassment. But like, I was so unfamiliar with any of this that they were like, well, you need to get a restraining order. But then they didn't tell me how. And they said something about getting a lawyer. And like, none of this information was straightforward. And I didn't know what to do. And when my friend got a hold of my ex, he had come back from Korea. I think he was like visiting his family or something, but like he came back to San Antonio and we kind of rekindled whatever, but he did everything he could think of to get rid of these photos and couldn't. Like, I don't know what I probably shouldn't say this, but like I like broke into his email because like back then it was a lot easier with social engineering. Like, if you knew the basic answers to those forgot password questions, like you can get into somebody's email pretty easily, and I did. But I couldn't do anything about it. And then I finally broke down and told like one of my best friends in ROTC, and they did what they could. And I told like the tech sergeant at ROTC, because I was like too afraid to tell the cadre, like the actual leadership, what was going on because of those pictures. And it was just, I lost maybe 20, 30 pounds in the span of 3 weeks. Hair was falling out, couldn't sleep, couldn't eat. Like, eventually he showed up at the house, like my parents' house, without like any announcement or whatever, and like forced me to leave with him. And I was like terrified. Like, I didn't know.
Did your parents know what was going on by that time?
Not really.
They still didn't know.
Yeah.
And they didn't think to ask. You've lost 30 pounds in 3 weeks. Your hair is falling out. You're not sleeping.
Yeah. at that point, I think I was embarrassed and still scared. Like, I didn't want to bring shame to my family. Like, who wants to see, their daughter's bits out there, you know?
Right, but I'm more curious about people in your life not noticing these changes going on and saying, "Hey, like, are you okay? Like, what is going on?" Because, I mean, 30 pounds is significant. You can't hide your hair falling out. Like, you just can't, So it's like if I see you every day and I know what you look like, right? And I know how your mannerisms are and everything. I know everything is changing about you. And if you're at my house and I'm your parent and your hair is falling out, I'm gonna be like, "What the fuck is going on? Like, why is your hair falling out?" You know?
Yeah, I don't know. I think people knew, or they had some sort of assumption or idea of she's just not doing well, but um in what I'm doing now, and I hear other people have that same experience, it's that it makes people uncomfortable. Like, they don't want to ask. They don't want to. People will say pretty frequently, "Well, we just didn't want to get involved." And yeah,
Quite
to me,
frankly, I think that's bullshit. Yes, it's
yeah, yeah,
absolutely uncomfortable. It's a little uncomfortable for me to have this conversation with you because, right, like 90% of these are perpetuated by people of my gender, right? It is what it is. And it is uncomfortable to talk about it, but those are the conversations that move this forward and stop this from happening. You have to be uncomfortable to make change. And it just, it just infuriates me that, people would, I guess, perceive, some pretty significant changes in you and not even really ask like what's going on. That kind of blows my mind. It really makes me mad.
they're my like closest friend in our OTC. He and I were like this, and he was very, very protective of me, and I went out of my way to make sure he did not find out because I knew he would kill him. Like, I knew he was, yeah, that was about to be a body right there. So um it was just heartbreaking to look back at those pictures and see, like, there were these really dark circles, like you could see my ribs, and um
There's
yeah.
a very specific look that people who are survive that get on their it's I mean, immediately when you look at people, you can know, right? And so again, that's why I kind of am just like surprised that, right? Everybody's seen that face. They know what's going on. That face only comes from that kind of trauma, and and for them to not ask, right? Particularly leadership in an ROTC program, right? I know for a fact that they are one of the things that is driven home is for them to look for shit like that, right? Like as a leader in an ROTC program at a college where this is, I'm sure, a whole lot more common than we even know, right? They are trained to look for that shit. So the fact that leadership didn't even have the balls or the foresight or just the skills to reach out to you, call you in that office and be like, "Look, I want the truth." And there's no like consequence for telling the truth, because I know you mentioned you felt embarrassed and shame, and right, like you didn't want to tell leadership because now there's these nude pictures of you floating around out there that he is, basically he's forced you to take, right? So me as a senior non-commissioned officer, I can sit back and I can look at that and be like, okay, if you tell me the truth about what's going on, we can investigate both sides of the story, right? Because there's two sides to every story. We can find out the truth, and no consequences have to come to you because you just need to change the situation.
Right. Yeah. And I just when we did like the briefs about MST and our OTC, I it was always framed in the cover your drink, don't dress like a
Right.
floozy or whatever. Like, I remember, I think it was maybe Dateline or something like that. They showed a video where this lady went dressed up like, you know, more conservatively and like went on a date and like someone mimed putting something in their drink. Like they just wanted to see how people around them would react. And when she was not dressed conservatively, people were just like, mm. And when she was, there was one man that actually got like really involved and he was like, no, she's not okay. Like, look at this. And like his wife was like, Harold, shh, none of our business. Like, and it was just like, wow, man. But then I remember, like, I don't know who it was or where they worked that they came to speak with us, but they were an NCO and they were talking about consent, where they're like, it's not romantic, but this could be weaponized against you. In not so many words, but he was like, you need to have a piece of paper there where they sign and you sign that, like, you guys are, you know, getting ready to throw down. But like the way that it was presented was that this woman is going to say whatever.
Well, you know, and I can speak a little bit about that because in my first two deployments, so into 04 to the beginning of 06, and then shortly, you know, 07, 08, coming back and reintegrating. First of all, the first deployment, there was basically no reintegration training. And there were a lot of guys' careers who got ended for false accusations, right? So the Army had to pivot at some point, and that's the birth of basically sharp training.
Right.
This is all from my experience when I was in the Army, and the Army only. I can't speak for the other branches, but there were a lot of dudes' careers who were getting ended like really falsely from those accusations, and they started prosecuting women for false claims, right? So I see where that's coming from, you know, the whole piece of paper analogy, and you both need to sign it, like, and it's silly, it's absolutely silly, but the dudes were scared in the Army. Like they were like, I don't want anything to do with any woman in uniform, period, because, you know, all of this is happening. And I think that's obviously detrimental to you guys getting help in real situations, right? So they didn't handle it the best, obviously.
Yeah, I mean, when I look at the statistics or whatever, the rate of false accusation is 2% to 10%.
Okay.
So for the rest of us, somehow that 2 to 10% drowns out the
Which
90.
is bullshit. And I'm not trying to make excuses for it. I'm just trying to present, like, this is what the Army did, and
yeah,
right, wrong, indifferent. It's just the way it shook out, and it affected everything.
it did. And even one of my coworkers, I mentioned that to him, and because he was talking about, like, he felt uncomfortable that someone kept feeling him up every day. And he was like, but I feel bad because if you did that, because you're young and beautiful, I wouldn't mind it. And I'm like, homeboy, that is what consent is. You get to decide who you're comfortable with touching you or not touching you.
Right. And that's exactly what I'm talking about, right? There's an element of confusion about the rules here, you know, and you saw it from his standpoint, right?
Yeah. Like he didn't understand that he was allowed to say, hey, don't touch me, you know? But yeah, it's just that consent, now having been through years of therapy and like recovered and really reading into this and learning, so that when I interview people, I understand where they're coming from. Consent is pretty fucking black and white. Like there's not really any sort of gray area, but like I do news stories about like MST headlines, and a lot of these people that are getting acquitted, it comes down to someone's interpretation of consent, when how you
But it was just a plain yes or fucking no. It's yes, you can touch me, no, you can't.
Right. And if you don't say no, that does not mean yes, but somehow but yeah, so it's just a lot of bullshit thrown on something that like is completely black and white, you know?
Yeah, For sure.
It's
So
really,
whatever happens to Mr. Psychopath, please tell me he's sitting in a prison cell somewhere.
I wish I could say that. Basically, when my leadership did finally get involved, I left Texas in the middle of the night. My mom had orders to Alaska, and I didn't tell anybody I was leaving. I just fucking left. And he kept stalking and threatening. And the funny part was that he victimized himself on Facebook, saying that like I broke his heart and da da da, da and this and that. And uh, the few of my friends that knew, they wanted to say something, but I was like, please don't. Like, I don't know what's going to happen. You know,
Yeah.
if you do call him out with the truth. And um, prior to leaving, I did have to call the police because he was threatening to like come to the house and like kill my whole family. And so uh, I think it was Bear County sheriffs. Somebody showed up at the house and like they're reading all these text messages and they're like, holy shit. And sometime during that summer, I had recanted, which is something that
It's
victims
bad,
do
right?
a lot. Um,
And it hurts the whole case, right? If
yeah,
you
well,
recant.
honestly, I don't know why it would hurt the case because it's par for the course. Like victims do
Right.
that. They were like, oh, you know what? Like I'm just gonna try and get away from this and leave it and try and move on. So they recant. And then there's like a honeymoon period where that person leaves them alone for a little bit and then it ramps up
Yeah,
all
of
over
course.
again. Like that is the cycle that so many people go through. So if someone doesn't recant, that would be questionable, you know?
Okay.
But this person shows up and or the sheriff shows up, takes all this evidence, gives me his card, da da da, and my dad is beside himself, like furious that this has happened, and neither him or my mom had a clue. Like my dad reacted um poorly, we'll say, but it was just out of him feeling helpless and not expecting to hear this from his daughter.
Well, I almost wonder if he probably had some feelings of disappointment in himself. I couldn't protect my little girl, right? Like those kind of feelings. I assume that's what you mean when you say he reacted poorly. He's probably very angry at himself. Like how could I let this happen? I was supposed to protect her, kind of thing. Yeah.
Yeah, very much that. And you know, my parents were very protective growing up, and I think in their mind it was if we don't really let her experience things, or even let her know that they're out there, she won't be affected by them, and that that blew up in my face for sure.
Right.
But I end up leaving with them. If we left probably like 2 o'clock in the morning just at random one night and started driving, you know. And I just remember when we got out of the state, I had this completely dissociative like episode. Like I was not in my body. I don't know what was going on. Like I was not there. And that's when the drinking started. And I was doing anything I could to just self-medicate and you know, I did not know I had PTSD. But so we got to Alaska in I think like 12 days, and there started being these messages of I'm coming there, I'm gonna fucking kill you, even up there, you know. And so I left again, and my ex from that time, he was stationed at Beale, so I went to go live with him, and I started having signs of psychosis. I started having, like, I couldn't leave his apartment. I'd start panicking.
You haven't made it to the actual Air Force yet either,
No,
right?
no.
There's,
And I
this
wasn't
is
supposed to
insane.
go active duty for like 12 or 13 months, but because of that situation, that got bumped up and I got sent to a different duty station because, you know,
Yeah, of course.
life was in danger. And the one thing that that ex did that probably saved me was he was like, if you're going to stay here, you can't drink, because like I was a mess. So I was sober for a good 3, 4 months. Then I go active duty, and I'm just like, you know what? New place, new people. It'll be fine. I'm not going to tell anybody anything. And I remember getting there, starting the in process, and everybody was like, "You're too pretty. You're too pretty. You're too pretty." And I was just like, "Thank you." And the lady in protocol, one of my favorite people ever, she said, "Stay away from the pilots." Like, she just said that as soon as I walked into her office to be introduced. She said, just stay away from them. And one thing I've noticed throughout my life is, people will tell me something but then not say why.
Yeah.
So I think I was there 2 weeks, and we had like one of those company grade officer club events. It was a beer tasting. I'd never been to a beer tasting before, hadn't drank in months, and I didn't know you were supposed to like sip and spit it out. Like, so I'm,
So you're just throwing them back.
Yeah.
Here we go. Yeah.
And my supervisor purposely sat me next to this guy because he was like, well, she's single, he's single, and he he didn't really say a word to me the whole time, but somehow we ended up holding hands under the under the table. Then I remember like vomiting profusely. Like, I just got up like nonchalant and like ran, well, didn't run, but I just like, scooted my way onto the bushes, hurled, and then like sat down. I was like, and like what about my
And was that from the alcohol, or was that from repulsion of him trying to hold your hand, and just the alcohol?
Alcohol, yeah. And oddly enough, I had moved into a place that was around the corner from my supervisors, not knowing he was on leave when I got to my base. But I had ridden with him and his wife, and a fiance at that time, but like they took me back, and that guy was with us. And I was quite obviously hammered. So he was like, well, I'm not going to let this girl, walk home at night where she don't even know her name right now. But like,
she casually just threw up in the bushes, wiped her face, sat back down. Probably not good to let her walk home by herself. Right. Yeah.
And that seemed harmless, like, okay, I'm just gonna, walk her to her door.
It kind of seems like the gentlemanly thing to do. I would do that, right? Like, I've done that. I've been the guy. My wife, in fact, she's been like that before. And it's like, okay, well, we're just dating, but you're not walking home by yourself. Like, this is, this is not okay.
Right. So nobody would think twice of that. Of, you know what, that's a really great thing to do. But when you walk somebody to their door, you let them inside and you leave, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Not. And I didn't have any of my furniture yet because I just moved there, and I was kind of embarrassed about that. I was like, okay, you can go now, bye. And he's like, no, I'm gonna put you in your bed. And I'm like, I don't have one. And like, he just refused to leave. And like, I remember going to pee, and then like, he came into the bathroom and like grabbed me by my hips and set me on the sink and like kept trying to kiss me. And I was just like, nope, like, doing everything I could to evade that. And apparently
it's starting all over again, right?
Yeah.
Like, here we are in another new place where you think you can start over, and
2 weeks.
Fucking 2 weeks, and it's, we talked about this before we started recording, but Alex Tessier has the same story. She gets to her first duty station, is, terrible things happen through somebody she's supposed to be guiding her. She has no idea where she's going. And then next thing she knows, she's in the same situation that you are. I think it's ridiculous. It's absolutely ridiculous.
It's just, and I have a very clear memory of that happening. And I think like that was a self-defense kind of thing for me. Like, I've always had a very, very vivid memory of things like from childhood. And I knew that happened, and I called him on it, and he was like, what are you talking about? That never happened, like over and over again. And I don't know. He kept, I think there was like a officer's call, and You know how they do like the hail and farewell, they welcome
Yeah.
new
Yeah.
people and say goodbye to, and I just remember sitting there and the wing commander being like, oh yeah, this is our new public affairs lieutenant, da 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 da. And that guy had planted himself next to me like as a dibs kind of way. And yeah, he kept just texting and being there. And there's a joke in New Girl where they're like, just Biden them, like, you know, just be there, you know, wear them down. And that's exactly what happened. And even when I left to go to tech school, there was this major in my class that I really respected. She was an amazing woman. And I brought this up to her after being there a few weeks. And I was just like, this guy won't leave me alone. Like, I don't know what to do. And like, I'm not attracted to him whatsoever. Like, uh, I just don't know what to do. And she said, well, you just say it, you know, like, don't worry about hurting someone's feelings. Like, if you don't feel safe, if you don't like him, like, just say it. And I did. And still, he was just like, well,
I'm going to try harder now, right? He probably took that approach. What a fucking jackass.
and then eventually, I remember after that beer tasting, like the dam broke for me alcohol wise. Like I was just, you know, that was the only way I knew to manage all the panic attacks and not being able to sleep was like, I'm going to drink till I pass out and call that sleep pretty much every night. Um, and that led to, you know, me and him hooking up a few times. And then I just said, you know, like I was the one that said, hey, do you want to be in a relationship? Because I figured, like, rather than me having a reputation as the girl that drinks and, you know, parties and whatever else, at least let me be, I guess, in a relationship. And this was somebody that, like, I still was not anywhere physically attracted to, but it was just a
Almost a
lesser
defense
evil.
mechanism, huh?
Right. And um that was one of those on and off again relationships because I did not like this person. And by then, I would say the PTSD and all of that just was manifesting in just the worst ways. Like me dissociating, panicking. Like,
What impact is this having on your performance inside of your job?
honestly, that was the only thing that was keeping me going.
So
So,
you found solace in doing your job and
mhm.
being, you know, the best public affairs officer you could be.
Yeah, my first year there, I was like ranked in the top 10% of lieutenants. So,
Well, that I mean, and that's incredible because you faced an incredible amount of adversity that nobody should have to be faced with, even before your career really began. And I think that speaks volumes to who you are as a person, your resilience, in whether you see it from that time or not. You know,
yeah,
to be a top 10% officer in the Air Force, that's an incredible feat. My sister was in the Air Force, and I didn't know until she penned major like how
it
competitive
is.
it really is. And then I find out she's, you know, like the number one major
Wow.
in the Air Force, right? Like I've got her leadership coming up to me saying, you don't know how much of an influence you are on her, and if you can convince her to stay in the Air Force, she'll put a star on someday. And I'm like, wow,
Wow.
way to go, sis, you know, like that's awesome. But like also not realizing, because I had those conversations, like how competitive officers, you know, are
Mhm.
in the Air Force, even more so than even in the Army, because there's less of you.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, I threw myself into my work. I've always been a very good writer and always, you know, loved communication, but that love of writing kind of gave me an escape. And the funny thing was the first article I wrote was about being a military brat, but then like I think the next one after that was sexual assault has no place at Fairchild Air Force Base. And then 2 weeks later,
Yeah. So
it's
so how does that impact you when you're writing about something that you're living through? And I don't it
it
I want to
was
be careful with the way that I choose my words here, because I don't want to say that you weren't courageous enough to go and, you know, tell people that there's a problem, but you're very much like there's a lot going on in
Yeah.
here
Yeah.
right, like for you to even try and make sense of that. So how does writing an article about sexual assault not having a place at Fairchild Air Force Base impact you when you're living through that, right? Like you've lived through it through ROTC, you're finding yourself in a situation where you're acquiescing to this dude because it's easier in your own mind for you to be in a relationship with him than deal with him constantly pursuing / stalking you, right?
Right. That's where that dissociation came into play. I was in survival mode. Like it did not even register to me that that's what was happening to me. And it wasn't until the following year, the sexual assault response coordinator there, she asked if I wanted to be a part of. There was a class where it's called RAD. It was like a class where they teach people self-defense techniques against
Yeah.
rape. And I was in a class with, I think there was like 4 other women and then 3 guys. And they were, teaching us various ways of getting out of, like, for instance, someone holding your wrists very tightly or, trying to overpower you. And I held on okay through that. Like, I was still not registering, hey, this happened to you. Um, but then at the very end of that week, there was like an exhibition, so to speak, where you have to use what you learned. And as soon as the guy grabbed my wrists and like I was on my stomach, I just shut down
I was gonna
completely.
say Pandora's box is now
Yeah.
open and you're done.
Yeah, I just had this full on out of body experience. Like I remember seeing myself on the ground, like just weeping. And it was like recorded also so that we could see our reactions and how to handle things. And then there was just me, like, shutting down. And I made my report that day.
Good for
And
you.
then like a whole lot of things were happening then too. There was issues with my roommate at the time, and basically I was just completely ostracized and bullied. And as soon as this report goes in, I find out there's this like rumor that I was in a gangbang in like the alert shack.
Here we go. Yeah,
Because
because people are again uncomfortable. They don't want to believe that.
I,
I'm willing to bet that this guy probably had a really good reputation around
he
wherever
did
you were.
not.
He
That's
did
the
not.
funny
Okay,
part. Yeah,
that surprises me because I have heard stories of guys with good reputations that are doing this, and
yeah,
people
no,
immediately take their side. No, he wouldn't do something like that kind of thing.
yeah.
Well, I mean that's good. At least he didn't have a good reputation.
Well, like he was supposed to make captain with like, everybody else that made captain around that time and didn't because of like something stupid he did when he first got to the base. But so like all of his peers were captains and he was still a first lieutenant. And it was just like a lot. But he did have like the reputation of like good dude that just did something stupid, but still, with me and him being one of those on and off relationship things. And like within that relationship, there was an actual rape. Like, and I got him to admit to it via text message. And I remember like one thing that had really upset me every time we had those like sapper briefings was like, oh, alcohol, is involved. And for that rape, I wasn't drunk. And I remember that we went to go see the freaking Jackie Robinson movie, 42, with Chadwick. And I didn't want to drive home because he lived downtown and I lived like on the South Hill, and that's like a hike. But I asked if I could just stay the night. And this was before we were actually together. And um, I said like, yeah, can I just stay the night? Like I'll sleep on the couch. And he was just like, I'm going to be up for a while. I know you have to get up early. Like, you just sleep in the bed. It's fine. And I was like, are you sure? And he's like, yeah, whatever. And I wake up, this dude's on top of me. Like,
Fuck.
and I just froze, like this is happening again. And, but yeah, that happened. And then for me to try and make a report, like, people were going to be like, oh, well, she's just mad because they broke up again. And, so, when I did make the report, it wasn't about him. It was about previous to that, from when I was in ROTC, but it got out that I made a report. So everybody assumed.
So you're public enemy number one because you've made a report?
Yeah.
Is that really how it felt? Like,
absolutely. And there was all these rumors of me being a gangbang, or like, apparently I blew the wing commander. And like, I remember wives like pulling their husbands closer whenever I went
and this is probably pretty common when people make reports, huh? You're probably not the only one who experiences this.
No. And eventually, like, it got so bad, like, my car got vandalized. And if I remember correctly, when they investigated that, it was concluded that I did it myself.
What?
And I remember maybe a week or two after that, it was probably April, this mom came to do a speech about her daughter that was killed she was in the Marine Corps, and she was killed by one of her former partners. And one of the things that she said was hallmark was that her car was vandalized. And that was one of the things that happened before she was killed. And I remember the vice wing commander saying, well, I think that we're really making an effort here, and things like that don't happen. When my car was literally like somebody tore on it in gold Sharpie.
So this mother has made the case that a sign of escalation is the vandalizing of the car, right? And it's so funny that you're speaking to that, because in the nonprofit work that I'm doing with QRF Up, we have some data kind of giving us insights into soldier suicides or military suicides, and one of the most interesting pieces of data is that all of them, within 3 or 4 days before they actually take their own life, experience insomnia. And that has been known for a long time. It's just been ignored. And so it's just incredible to me that here's a woman who's lost her daughter saying that this is a sign of escalation, because it wasn't long after her car was vandalized that she turns up dead.
Yeah. Yeah. And in this time period, I can't tell you how many times I tried to kill myself. Like,
Yeah. In your questions, you answer over 20 suicide attempts.
Yeah.
And for you to, you gotta think like at least one of those should have been successful, right? Like, so
yeah, I'm very lucky to be here. The most serious one I had was 2015. I took like a whole bottle of Tylenol PM, and my liver was on the verge of shutting down, and I should not be here right now.
Well, I think the universe, or your God, or whatever you believe in, definitely has bigger plans for you, because you would think that with 20 attempts, one of those would have been successful. So definitely here doing the work that you're supposed to be doing. I think that's a sign from whatever you believe in. Me, it's the universe, whatever. And so I appreciate you sharing in detail all of this, because it's important. And I have to ask, like, it's got to leave you jaded about the Air Force. You probably don't have a lot of love for the Air Force, huh?
The wild part is, I still really respect the services. Like, when someone asks me, like, should I join, I tell them, what happened to me. But I try to say that my case was extreme. Hopefully, that's what I choose to believe. Because like, our country still needs protection. Our country still needs, like, to believe in service and honor and integrity. Like, if we don't have those values to believe in, what do we have?
Yeah.
And I truly, that I guess helps me sleep at night thinking like this was extreme. What happened to Vanessa Guillen was extreme. Like what happened to all of the women that were at Lackland when they were in basic training, like extreme, hopefully. But
That's a lot of extreme going on, though.
exactly, that's
That's
the
the
thing
problem,
though. Yeah,
right? So is it really extreme, or is are we refusing to call it the norm?
to me, like in speaking with the amount of people I have so far, it definitely seems normal. Like one of my guests, she joined, I think it was 78, and her story from 78 to getting out in, I think she said 94. Oof. But I think it's like the culture is still very much perpetuating this being covered up and people looking the other way. And um, but I don't think that's just a military thing. That's our culture at large in the US. So, like, the military is a much smaller population. So, of course, it's exaggerated there, but it is representative of a much larger problem in just our country. And I guess knowing that helps me believe that like our service members at the core, I think everyone does believe in integrity and service. It just like consent, it has different meanings to people. So
Which is asinine, right?
like,
Because it's very black and white, yes
right,
or
right.
no, right? Like that
So
doesn't.
like when people think of loyalty, they think I'm going to protect my homie that, raped this girl, not I'm going to, you know, out them.
I'm not going to be a decent human and go
Right,
protect the victim in the situation, no
right,
matter how homey we are with each other. Like you
right.
just don't do that. And
Mm,
if any one of my friends did it, they're not they're not walking away from it. And I find out, you know what I mean? Just like what you said with your best friend in ROTC, you kept it from him because you were like, I know what this dude's going to go do.
mhm, 100%. And they gave me a compassionate PCS, and I went to my duty station at Hurlburt Field, and um, I think I made it 2 months before having like a complete mental breakdown, and I ended up in the hospital, and then got med boarded, and what led to the mental breakdown was there was a guy at like the apartment next to me. I think we met on like OK Cupid or something like that, and pretty much the same thing went down, except I was able to push him out of my place and lock the door. But that just, yeah,
So I don't mean to laugh, but like at some point, like where do you are you jaded about dating now? Like
was,
how like you know what I mean? Because this is like you're 0 for fucking 4 at this
yeah,
point. Like it's like you can't get
yeah,
a break. It's like you keep trying to put yourself out there and move on with your life because we all want someone to share life with.
yeah,
I really do believe that. But here you are, here it is again. It's
yeah,
happening a third or a fourth time at this point, which is like fuck.
yeah. I just I really was not healed, and I don't think I should have kept putting myself out there at the time. Like I think there's a point where people have like a come to Jesus moment of okay, not victim blaming, but it's more of a I need to change something, like I need to work on myself, whether that's going to therapy or getting on medication or just not dating for a while. And I did not come to that conclusion until about 2019 after an engagement ended, and that was a whole thing. Um, but a lot of times it was just my mental health was trash, and I think like I would get really excited about a new person and think like, oh hey, nothing's wrong with me, and then like once that initial honeymoon bubble pops, like the depression came back, and the panicking and all this other stuff, and then that other person would be like, whoa, I I can't handle all this.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. So you get med boarded, you're in the transition, you are still clearly spiraling out of control because you've got a lot of things going on in there, and rightfully so.
Yeah.
And you mentioned your biggest challenge to overcome, through the transition was mental health. And you say you happen to get lucky and find a medication that worked. You were better in 3 days after suffering for almost a decade. I want to take a guess at what that medicine was, because there's a medicine that changed my life after 3 days as well. And I'm curious, is it the same medicine? Was it of the plant variety?
No, actually.
Damn it. I
Yeah.
was super excited to
Yeah.
maybe share that experience, but
I did have a guest a few weeks ago though where he had very severe PTSD and plant medicine completely saved his life.
it saved mine for
Yeah.
sure. I mean, I just last week, Heroic Hearts, the charity that sent me,
Mhm.
they published an article on me because of all the changes I made. Over 100
Oh,
pounds
wow.
lost. Started this company, started the podcast,
Mhm.
becoming a huge advocate in the veteran space to really help curtail the suicide epidemic. Like, not trying to toot my own horn, but it's just all byproducts of having that experience. And so yes, it really did change my life, and I absolutely believe when he says it changed his life. It changed his life. And so when I saw the answer to this question, I found a medication, and 3 days I was like, it has to be plant medicine. It has to be, because it's the only thing that I know that can give you a decade's worth of therapy in 3 nights. Now,
Right.
I'm curious to know what you found that actually worked.
I have Reddit to thank. I had a nightmare hospitalization around like the day after Christmas, 2022, and like two male patients got into my room. There's a whole podcast episode. I've been going through it, man. Like, I'll tell you.
I feel so like I just want to give you a hug. Like,
I
Jesus
know.
Christ, this is ridiculous.
Yeah, like it's just been a lot, but I during that hospitalization, like laws were broken, my patient rights were not, you know, they were taken away. My roommate, she actually came on the podcast and we shared that experience. But I remember just being so furious that again I could not defend myself.
Right.
And I had just given up. I just said, fuck it. Like, if this is what my life's gonna be, like, I'm done. Like, it's been this cyclically. Like, maybe it's months at a time, maybe it takes a few years, but it's just the same trauma. It just keeps happening. And I was not sleeping well at all. Like, I would maybe sleep an hour and a half and then just be awake. But I'd spend that time on Reddit, and I stumbled upon this subreddit that was called like obscure drugs or something like that. And I was like, oh, maybe I'll find a method to, end it. And
So you weren't looking to get better.
no,
You were looking to check out.
yep,
And that takes a lot of balls to admit,
yep,
because, a lot of people don't want to admit that, but, no matter what you've been through, that cyclic kind of trauma cycle that you're talking about is very common for a lot of people coming out, dealing with the loss of identity and in purpose in transition. And so, this is where kind of your story and all the rest of everybody's kind of overlaps, because, we do start seeking out things like, okay, well, I'm an avid motorcycle rider. Like, it's nothing for me to peg that motherfucker and just let's see what happens. You know what I mean? And that's common, right? And you are going to obscure drugs subreddit, and you're not looking to get better.
no,
You're looking to check the fuck out. Like,
yeah,
what is, obviously I think your thought process might've been, and this is just me speculating, but I took a whole bottle of Tylenol PM. That didn't fucking work. So I need to go find something that will,
right,
you know what I mean?
right. And somebody, I wish I could find that post again or that person and just thank them profusely, because they posted about this medication called Auvelity. And Auvelity is, let's say it's like two parts DXM, so like the active ingredient in Robitussin, and Wellbutrin.
Okay.
And they were just raving. Like, they were like, the fog went away, and like I don't feel like a robot anymore. And yada yada yada. So I, searched further, and there were more subreddits about like medications and antidepressants and whatnot. So I kept searching Auvelity, and what what caught my eye was that the posts were not like clearly shills. Like some people were like, I kind of felt a little better, but it wasn't this miracle that this person said. And some people are like, oh, it didn't work for me, I'm gonna, try the next thing. Um, and I don't know why that gave me hope. Like, okay, obviously people are having different experiences, but I sent a message to my psychiatrist at the time because I was getting community care. And I said, hey, have you heard of this medication? And she said, no, but let me ask my colleagues about it. And she did. And they were like, put her on that. Like, like didn't even take a breath. So she said, yeah, if you let's give it a try. And the VA didn't have it in their formulary. They still don't. And TRICARE was like, no.
Yeah, fucking.
Because it was new. It had come out, I think, in like October or November in 2022. And I don't know what this nurse practitioner said to whomever on the insurance side after me trying to advocate for myself for, I think it took like 2 weeks, and I kept getting no's. I don't know if she cursed. I don't know if she threatened to get them fired, or she just said, look, this girl almost died, a few weeks back. I'm not giving up on her. And, her blood's going to be on your hands, if you don't at least let her try. And I think, let's say I found out about it maybe like January 2nd or 3rd. It finally got approved, and I got it from Walgreens on January 31st. And February 2nd, I was better. Like completely better.
Just immediately. But so when you say better, what do you mean better? No more suicidal thoughts and ideations, no more deep, dark depression, no more, I imagine probably that internal monologue was like, why am I living? You're a piece of shit kind of thing. You don't deserve anything. Like, I mean, these are, because like I said, this is all like unresolved trauma. Like mine was childhood trauma. I didn't realize it, right, until the ayahuasca showed me, all the things that I had been pushing down and just, basically blacked out of my mind.
Right.
It just affects you, and you don't realize that. And so, hearing you talk about these things, it's very, similar to unresolved trauma from childhood or whatever, right? It just,
that's that too.
And those are the thoughts that you have, right? Like, I don't deserve to be here. I'm not worth anything. I'm not capable of anything. I'm a piece of shit.
Yep.
I'm just nothing makes you feel anything really. And then all of a sudden you're just like, the colors are brighter. And
yes, yeah, that is the best way that I was able to explain it. Was all of a sudden I could see colors again, because the world was just dull to me. Like I could have eaten like a Thanksgiving feast and it would have tasted like paste. Like it just,
right.
I got no pleasure from anything. And I woke up on February 2nd and didn't have that I'm a stupid piece of shit like internal monologue. Like, have you seen the BoJack Horseman show? Like, there's an episode where his internal monologue is pretty much the show, and it's I'm a stupid piece of shit. Like,
yeah. Well, and I only say that because I would call myself that, I don't know, 1,000 times a day in anything that I did. I had zero belief in myself, and I really thought I was the biggest piece of shit on the planet.
Same. And yeah, I remember not feeling panicky at all. Like the way I had been able to explain anxiety, it was like there was this lightning storm inside all the time where you just feel like
yeah,
that stopped. I actually ate 3 times that day and didn't drink. And I had wine upon wine in my apartment, and I didn't feel the need to like numb myself from my own numbness, if that makes sense.
Yeah,
Like,
absolutely. Yeah, because you're running from that. That's
yeah,
what alcohol does. It takes you completely away from that. I was really big drinker when I started my med board process. So I went through my alcoholism phase, if you will,
right.
as a before I was even out. So I had kicked alcohol before I got out. But when I was in it, I almost craved the feeling of being drunk because it masked the feeling of, I don't even know how to describe that feeling that I was feeling. You know what I mean? But the drunk feeling was better
Yeah,
than that feeling,
that's
essentially.
yeah. It was just like complete emptiness, and uh, all of a sudden I was full. Like I had a personality again. I was like singing. I cleaned up my entire place. Like
Hell yeah.
it was. Yeah, I woke. It was like being reborn, I guess, to be cliche, but like I was a human being again after being a zombie. Like I was dead alive basically for years, and then all of a sudden I was like actually alive.
So this one pill makes all of those changes, but I'm willing to bet the pill is just the beginning because there's probably a lot of work you have to do on yourself
Yeah, the
with the
thing.
help of, now it allows you to start doing that work, right?
Well, I had done the work like in the 8 or 9 years, well, probably 10 years from starting therapy. So like I had all these tools, but I would never use them. Like I
So
was,
this allowed you to
oh,
employ the tools that you had
yes,
already learned. And see,
yeah.
and that's what I mean by the work, right? Like I
Mhm.
think oftentimes if we really take a step back and look, there are events in our lives that do naturally give us those tools.
Right.
You don't necessarily have to go to therapy or go on an ayahuasca journey like I did to get access to those tools. You
Yeah.
you largely already have them, and I think we ignore them because it's work or whatever, or it's uncomfortable. We don't want to go sitting with our emotions and really really revisiting all of the things that you have to revisit in order to overcome them. But that's what I mean by the work. Now you have to employ these tools that you're very aware, I'm sure, that you have been ignoring. And
Oh, yeah. There's like also, I don't know. There were certain books that people would like suggest to me, like The Untethered Soul or things like that, and I wasn't able to read them. And I love reading, but it was too raw, and I just like wasn't there yet. And now, yeah, sure, I devour those kinds of books, but like at the time, like say it was 2015 or 16, like I just someone would give me like the Four Agreements book, and like I would just like just throw it. Like it just wasn't, my brain was not ready to take in that information. And then the information I did have from like therapy and stuff, I was not, it was just like shoved in a box in the corner of my brain. And yeah, it was just like the lights came on, and in that time I moved from Houston back to live with my parents, because I was like, okay, like the area I lived in Houston was really dangerous, and I was like, let me just save money and try and figure things out, not knowing that I was going to get better. And I got to my parents' house, and I was like, I don't know if I'm just happy to not be in that really shitty neighborhood anymore, or I'm actually better. Because like when you leave a hospitalization, you have that brief bit of euphoria that like you're just not in the hospital anymore.
I'm sure
Yeah.
I've never been hospitalized like that, but I can imagine what you're
Yeah,
talking about because I hate hospitals and I've had multiple surgeries. I can't wait to get the fuck out of there. Like
exactly.
it's the minute I walk in the hospital, it's the most uncomfortable thing in the
Right.
world. I hate the atmosphere. I hate just everything about it. So I can relate a little bit, just not in like an overnight stay capacity or whatever.
You don't want an overnight stay, but yeah, there's just this euphoria of, fuck, I'm not in there anymore. And
Yeah.
I thought that that was what was happening, but then like that euphoria, it was like, okay, it's been 3 days. Okay, it's been a week.
Well, and that's probably compounding for you, right? Like,
Yeah,
because now you're starting to see, oh, wait, this doesn't
right.
just go away. I get to keep I get to hang on to this
Right.
even, right? Like, which is really freaking cool because
Yeah.
that's a really cool thing to rediscover about yourself.
And I was starting to stand up for myself and speak assertively and uh, not overreact to everything or be hypervigilant. And there was like an actual genuine joy rather than me just putting on a face, to get through the day. And I remember my parents watching me, like, I guess waiting for the other shoe to drop, and it just never did. And they were just like, holy shit, she's better. And like, I remember my mom like tearfully talking to my brother, like, I think she's okay. And that broke my heart, but also felt so good.
Yeah, absolutely. And I relate to that because when I was drinking, I remember my dad begging me to stop
Right.
crying as he dropped me off to the airport and feeling so bad about myself at the time. The first thing I do is go back into the airport and get a double
Yep.
and not quitting. Right. And
Yep.
then, just really 2 days ago, he sent me a text because I sent him that article that had been published about me. And he just comes back with, I'm so extremely proud of you. And it's just like I know that feeling, right?
Yeah.
Like I know that feeling because we've been to that same dark place, and it's just it's an accomplishment, right, to get over that and to come through it. And so I'm curious, how did all of this influence your decision to start the Silence Voices of MST? Because I think I kind of know podcasting for me and being able to help share these stories and have conversations with other veterans who've been through whatever they've been through. It doesn't all have to look the same. For me, it's cathartic. It's very cathartic in that not only do I get to share, some of myself with someone else and some of the struggle I've been through, but it also kind of points out where I might still need to do some work on myself. And I get to do that. Right. So I have a feeling that's part of the reason you started it.
I it's funny is my ex-fiance got me into The Office, and that show has like popped in and out of my life numerous times, but I never really stopped to actually watch it. And I was hooked like immediately after like the second episode. And then I found the Office Ladies podcast, and I was never a podcast person. I just, with the way my mental health was, I could not pay attention to something that long.
For sure.
And when I started listening to those podcasts, like I was drawn in just by Jenna and Angela's friendship and the genuine love you hear between these two women. And like whenever their castmates would come on for like an interview or something, like that love was there. And I'm sitting there thinking like, wow, and they already had like a built-in audience because The Office was like this huge show in the aughts. And I was just thinking like, oh, okay, that's really cool that they have that. Not even thinking to put these things together, but then I read it again. I went on the 2X chromosomes subreddit, and there was a young lady. She was probably a junior in high school, and she posted like, "Hey, a recruiter came to my school today, and I was really thinking about joining the army or whichever service. I don't remember which one. What do you guys think?" And there were thousands of comments of "Don't do it. This is what happened to me. Please don't do it. If you value your mental health, don't do it. Don't do it. Don't do it." Like thousands upon thousands of comments. And as an MST survivor and someone that had been hospitalized numerous times, it still did not register to me how many people have had this experience, because it wasn't just women commenting. And even the men that had commented, even if they weren't victims or survivors of it, they were like, no, I saw something like this happen to a coworker, and I never forgave myself for not stepping up and trying to help them. And me being someone that loves to read and research, I put, Air Force or Army and put all the different services in the search bar on 2 X chromosomes to see all the previous posts, and oh my God, there were so many that same thing of either someone sharing their experience from while they were serving or a young person asking, should I join? And there were just probably billions of comments of this horrible thing happening. And I don't know why that was a thing that was like office ladies, MST podcast, like, and um, I just went from there. I found a few, like, I didn't even have social media at this time, but I put a page up and added a bunch of people from high school, and then found all of these groups about veterans and stuff, and asked if people would be interested in a podcast. And the amount of comments on these like little just itty bitty market research type questions, it was just overwhelming. And my parents and I were in family therapy at the time, just, trying to maintain this newfound uh, good mental health. And I brought it up, and the therapist was like, I think this would be incredible for you to do for the exact reasons that you said, where it gives you catharsis, and that also means that you've moved into post traumatic growth, where you're taking that pain and turning it into something to empower other people. And
Boom.
my mom was like, are you sure you want to do this? Like, what if you get triggered? And what if, I don't know, what if somebody gets upset by this podcast and like tries to sue you, or, something like that. And my dad was more, um, he was encouraging, but I think his mind also went back to that reaction of when that police
Right.
officer showed up at the house, and his was, how can I protect you? That
Yeah.
was more his reaction. Um, so we came up with like a safety plan for if I do get triggered, or if I start to, exhibit signs of how I was before, where like the main indicator that I'm not doing well is that my room just becomes a mess. Like, I just stop caring. And none of that has happened. Like, we haven't had to use any of the safety plan. We haven't gone to family therapy in a while. Like, things have just kind of panned out. And, I found a job, and I just survived the craziest car accident the other day, or well, not the other day, but like in May. And um, like you were saying before, of having a higher purpose for my life, I'm just like, I think I just have plot armor at this point. Like, like, so that's going to be the title of my memoir in the future.
I
But
mean,
yeah, it's just been this really beautiful thing. Like, of course, the episodes of like first 30 minutes or so are very difficult to hear, like what people have been through. Um, but what I try to do is set it up so they share their story. They share what worked for them, what didn't in terms of healing, what they've done since they've gone on that healing journey, whether that's starting an organization or writing a book, or um, becoming involved in other nonprofits. And then I asked them to also give like a shout out to either someone that helped them or an organization that did, so that people can find resources out there that they may not know about. And just hearing other people overcome, and some of the messages I've gotten on Facebook, or the messages that people send to the particular guest of saying, oh my gosh, I can relate so much, and thank you so much for putting yourself out there. And um, a lot of my guests after the episode, they're just like, wow, I thought that was going to be so much harder, and I actually feel better. And one guest, she decided that she was finally going to put in a report on the person that harmed her. And it's just been amazing to grow with these people. And I, like, a lot of them I talk to like every week still. So
well, and it speaks to, like, why did you start the podcast? Are you sure you want to do this? Well, if not me, then who? Because here you're looking on these subreddits and there's billions of comments, right? Thousands of people, not just women, but men as well, commenting their stories. So it really becomes a, if not me, then who? And I'm willing to bet that because you're doing this and you're helping others share their story, which then becomes cathartic for them, can kick off their healing journey, is why you haven't had to use any of your safety plan, because you know that you're not alone in this anymore. You're not unique in what your experience is, right? And now they're understanding that there are others out there that can relate to their experience and that they're not alone in it. And this, however tragic the trauma actually is from the events, you can get better and you can move on with your life and things can be okay, and you're not quote unquote unique in your experience. There are others who can relate and hold your hand and cry with you and laugh with you and all of that stuff, right? Like, that's absolutely necessary for us to heal. And so I'm super proud of what you're doing. I think that it's amazing. I think, it's a mission that, needs to be out there. And I'm glad that, you're the one doing it, because you are very candid with what's happened to you, and you don't seem jaded by it at all. You don't seem,
anymore. Yeah.
right. Well, and of course, because you've done the work and you've worked on yourself, and now you're this advocate and this catalyst for others healing, and like, that has to feel really good.
It really does. And you know how your dad said that he was proud of you. Like, my little brother, honestly, it shook me up. But like, my younger brother and I are so close, and he's a pilot in the Air Force. He's actually finally finishing out his contract and getting out. But he has seen the lowest of the lows with me, and I don't know how many times he's gotten the phone call of, your sister almost died, and like, my own trauma has traumatized those that I love very much, and I regret that. I do feel a lot of guilt for that, of not knowing how much my own pain was hurting other people. But like, he and his wife, they called me the other day. Was it last week or the week before? But he was like, yeah, me and we were just, watching Lost. And then we started talking about you, because what I used to do when I was super depressed was just binge watch any show. It didn't matter if I liked it or not. Like, I went through the entire thing of The Simpsons a couple of summers ago.
That's a lot. There's like 20 something seasons of that show.
I'm 35.
There's more than 35.
Yeah.
God damn. Like, shit.
And one of them was Lost, and it was when I went to visit him with my parents. I just continued the binge at their house. I signed into my Hulu account, and went for it. And they just remember me not sleeping and like barely eating and drinking a bunch, and then like watching Lost. And that was pretty much the extent of my activity on that visit. And they were just like, yeah, we watched an episode of Lost, and then we were talking about you, and then how much you've just done in the last 2 years. We are so proud of you. And I was just like, thank you. Like,
Yeah.
because it didn't dawn on me. Like, I know I've done better, but it didn't dawn on me that my healing was also healing those that I love. And it, that really was eye-opening. And
It's kind of funny how that works out, huh?
yeah,
Like,
and
we can cause so much pain, but by healing ourselves, we can actually heal others, which is, I don't know.
it's a
There's
beautiful
something pretty
thing.
special about
Yeah.
that. Yeah.
And
Oh,
there's
how do you see your show evolving in the future?
I am actually working on developing like a dedicated YouTube channel where it's not just me sharing the podcast episodes on there. One of my good friends here, he's like a very talented videographer, and we've been working on some deep dives. And he has me acting and stuff, which is hilarious. But so there's several characters now that will be involved, but it's not necessarily making fun of MST, but just pointing out how ridiculous it is that this is still a problem. And there's like what's going on with the Coast Guard. They're, you know,
I'm not familiar. What is going on with the
there
Coast
was
Guard?
this whole thing called Operation Fouled Anchor, where there was this big investigation. They realized there was a really fucking bad problem at the Coast Guard Academy, and their leadership was like, we're just not going to tell anybody, you know? And CNN did this investigative report and, you know, just blew the doors open on this thing. And uh, the current commandant, she just got hauled in front of, you know, Congress to talk about this, and she was grilled. And um, there is a woman I'm in contact with that she really opened my eyes to uh, certain people saying they had no idea this happened or was happening when in fact they did. So
You got a
that's,
little bit of a whistleblower coming on your show talking
oh,
to you right now.
she's like a marching band, like
Hell yeah. Good.
like
That's
fire
awesome.
screamers, and you know. But she gave me all of this information about all of her work. Her organization is called Coast Guard Right the Ship, and she's been fighting this fight for a decade. And she really opened my eyes to how race is actually a huge aspect of military sexual trauma. And me being a Black woman, I'm like, why didn't I see that? Like, but when I thought about it and thought about my experiences while I was active duty, I was like, oh, fuck, you're right. Because even when I got to my first base, I remember people being like, oh, I've never been with a Black girl before, and like saying crazy shit like that. And then they wouldn't ask me on dates. They would just ask if I would come over. And, you know, like my roommate, when she got stationed there, like, was it maybe like 8 months later, people were like, oh, let me cook for you, and asking her on dates. And she's this like very beautiful blonde hair, blue eyed girl. Like the way they approached us was so different. And in the first season of my podcast, a lot of my guests were Black women, and they would talk about how they were treated just as Black women. And one in particular was a general's daughter, and she was talking about trying to go through the VA claims process. And what happened to her was just horrific. And you would think, as a general's daughter, she would get like the red carpet treatment. She got anything but that. But then when she went to make her claim with the VA, people would be like, oh, God, this is so terrible, terrible, terrible. But then they'd see African American on there and be like, was it really that bad? And
Are you fucking kidding me?
yeah, yeah. And she was saying one of her best friends, she got rated 100% because someone yelled nice tits at her. Whereas this general's daughter was attacked, beaten, like, you know, all sorts of like her assailant was threatening to come on the base and shoot her and shoot her staff. And like that was when they did something about it, was when other people were threatened, not her.
Which is bullshit. It blows my mind because
Yeah.
I came in 2003, and from the beginning, we all wear the same color fucking uniform. It doesn't matter what color our skin is, because I promise you, laying in that fucking hasty or that foxhole, like our uniform's the same color. We have the same fucking mission and the same training. Like, and some of my best friends are not white people, right? Like we never ever saw that. And this is coming from somebody who grew up in rural Indiana, where there are not a lot of African Americans. I'll be honest, right? Like there just aren't. But I wasn't even raised that way either.
Right.
Like you just not like. So I'm sorry that it is that way. I obviously it's not my fault, and I can't do a whole lot to change it other than just give people a platform to tell
Right.
their stories and call attention to it, right? Which is, I think, what we should all be doing, right? Like, I'm so happy that you have the platform that you do, particularly because, I think MST, while it disproportionately affects women, it also affects men. And I think they probably have a lot harder time talking about it. I've had a guy on my show who is a victim of sexual abuse as a child, and he's a male. And his story is incredible because for 20 something years, he wouldn't talk about it. And it was eating him alive because I'm a man and I'm not supposed to talk about this. Right. And for you to go through what you've been through, to turn it into a show, to give people a platform to tell their stories and call attention to this problem, and to not only just pigeonhole it into, because you could have very easily done it to just Black women if you wanted to, right? But that's not the point of this. We don't see the color or the gender. What we see is the problem and how it affects everyone. And so, good for you, and good for you making a change. I want to call attention to this because usually I ask, what are your goals and aspirations for the next few years? But your answer to this question was incredible because it's so lofty, and I absolutely 100% cannot wait until I see you on the cover of Time magazine. I know that someday you will be on the cover of Time magazine, and I think that's awesome. Why Time magazine though?
It's iconic, basically. But like, if you're on the cover of Time, to me, that means you've made an impact. Like, you've made an impact to the point where people can't ignore it. And like now, Time, they just put out a cover every 3 weeks, it seems like. They're not even an issue. But like, the way that they do their graphic design is so impactful that people sit up and take notice every time there's new Time. But to be there is not so much like a like I'm a celebrity now thing. It's this issue finally has the visibility that it needs.
And I understand what you're saying about Time magazine because I'm almost 40. I don't know how old you are, but growing up, like Time, that was like the magazine. That and Rolling Stone were the two magazines that you wanted to be on the cover of, right? Like if you're anybody in any kind of industry or making any kind of change, that's it. And so I know you're going to get there. I can't wait till that happens. There's a woman that I just had on my podcast. I recorded with her last week. She has I believe it's called Battlefield Lifestyle magazine. It's a digital magazine. I want to connect you with her and get you. Hopefully, I'm sure she would love to feature you. And then I had a meeting with another guy who I was on his podcast, who's connecting me with another MST victim, who's a big influencer. So when that connection happens, I already let him know that we were doing this interview and that you know all the good work that you're doing. And so definitely like to get you connected that way as well. I really appreciate you being here and telling your story and really calling attention to this stuff. Please tell everybody how they can connect with you, where they can find your show and everything that you're doing, and how, most importantly, they can help further your message.
Well, we have a Facebook account. We have Instagram, TikTok, LinkedIn. Working on a Patreon right now. The website is silencevoicesmst.com. We also have a Facebook group. It's the Advocates of MST. It's one of the few Facebook groups that allows all genders. Anyone can join, even if you haven't been through that, but maybe you have a loved one that has, and you're just trying to figure out how do I support them. That's the place to go. Also, the YouTube channel as well. And the best way I think to help further the message is just, sharing the content and not being afraid to be judged if you choose to speak up about it. I know a lot of people are like, oh, well, it's just a cry for attention when someone posts something on social media that isn't, look how great my life is. So it's not attention seeking to share that you've had a problem, and that mentality needs to change. And one thing I'm a huge proponent of now is like, how people are always like, oh, the bar's in hell. It doesn't have to be. Like, if you hold other people to higher standards, then that bar is no longer in hell. So don't accept that. Hold people accountable for their shit. That's the overall message of the show is like accountability is going to be the thing that ends this problem. Speaking about it and not being ashamed that someone hurt you is going to be what ends this problem. And I do notice that like young men that haven't fallen prey to like Andrew Tate and people of the red pill variety, they are so different and so um, cognizant of the things that they say and do. Like my nephew impresses me. He's 18. He impresses me every single day where he's just like, oh, well, I don't want to, say something sideways to someone because I don't know what they're going through. And I'm like, you're 18 and thinking outside yourself. Like, I know when I was 18, like, we weren't like that, 20 years ago. But like kids now, they're growing and changing. And that's because of people talking about stuff and sharing their experiences. So that's how we grow and that's how we change. And that's how we change the culture, not only of the military, but like countrywide and worldwide.
Yeah, I totally agree. Thank you so much, Rochelle, for being here and telling your story. I really appreciate it. Everyone, please go like, rate, review, subscribe, download the episode. Help me accomplish the mission of getting this in front of 1 million veterans by the time I turn 40 on May 9th, 2025. I know it's a lofty goal. There's 19 million veterans in the United States. There's no reason that we can't make this goal a reality. And just help change veterans' lives. Let them know that they're not alone. There are people out here that can relate to whatever experience you're going through. Hopefully, this show has evidenced that at this point. And again, Rochelle, I really thank you for being here. Thank you so much for telling your story and spending a Saturday afternoon with me.
Thank you so much for having me. And don't give up if you're in just the worst place in your mind. Don't give up. Anything can change at any moment.
Clearly. Take care, everybody. We'll see you next week. That's our show, and I'm truly thankful you've joined us at The Strategic Veteran. If our conversation today sparked curiosity or if you're ready to elevate your game, I'm here to help. Visit thestrategicveteran.com for exclusive show notes and resources or to book a coaching session directly with me. Take a moment to subscribe to our podcast and share your review. Your support makes all the difference. For more insights and daily strategies, let's connect on LinkedIn and keep the conversation going. Remember, this isn't just a podcast, it's your strategic advantage in action. Until our next rendezvous, stay bold and continue the mission.